Rotarians and guests, welcome to the October 7th meeting of the Rotary Club of York. We are the 24th largest club in the world. Leading us today in our song and pledge is Aaron Jacobs, and our invocation is past President Gordon Fryrick.
Thank you, President Ann. Rotarians, please join me. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with unity and justice for all.
I won't take that personally. With 27 days until the election, we pray for all who hold or seek positions of leadership and responsibility in our state and national life. Let your blessing rest upon them and make them responsive to your will so that our state and nation may be to the world an example of justice and compassion. Deepen our love for our country and our desire to serve it. Strengthen our power of self-sacrifice for our nation's welfare. Teach us to uphold its good name by our own right conduct. Cause us to see clearly that the well-being of our nation is in the hands of all its citizens. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Jacobs. Thank you, Brother Fryrick. We have a few announcements today. Our membership committee is meeting today at 1 o'clock via Zoom. Our board will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., also via Zoom. And volunteers for our PPE, which is our Preserve Planet Earth Committee, will be helping plant trees Saturday, October 10th, this Saturday around the city of York. They will meet at the parking lot at Shadowfax at 8 a.m. So contact past President Al Sykes with any questions. Appreciate all your volunteers. As always, your program suggestions are welcome in this virtual format. Please share those with past President and Program Chair Mike Summers. The Service Above Self Committee is looking for nominees. It's this time again to nominate a deserving individual for the Charles S. Wolf Service Above Self Award. There are many unsung heroes in our community who have helped step up in a major way to bring light and hope during this very challenging time. Please consider nominating an individual who's made an impact on our community, gone above and beyond what is expected of him or her, and has not received recognition for their actions. Nominations can be sent to President-elect Jackie Summers. The Rotary Leadership Institute. How many of you have been to Rotary Leadership Institute? Okay. You have an opportunity to register to attend this virtual seminar, which will take place on October 24th. Rotary Leadership Institute is a leadership and development program to strengthen Rotary clubs through education, collaboration, and the exchange of ideas among its future leaders. It is a 3-part curriculum that's facilitated by experienced and trained faculty members, engaging participants through open discussion, problem solving, and creative role playing. I'm sure it'll be creative if it's virtual role playing. The Rotary Leadership Institute is an opportunity to meet with other Rotarians, share experiences, and learn new skills to take back to our clubs. If you want to learn more about this wonderful organization we call Rotary and find out what you can actually do to start changing the world, please contact Bert by October 14th. Our theme this year is Rotary opens opportunities. So this is another opportunity that's open to members of our club. So to allow plenty of time for today's program, we will forego our poll and biz spotlight, but that will be back next week. Our program today features Pennsylvania Auditor General Eugene DePasquale, who is the Democratic candidate for the 10th Congressional District, and he is joined by past Rotary Club President Mike Summers to have a conversation about the upcoming congressional race. Eugene was first elected to statewide office as Auditor General in 2012 and re-elected in 2016. He is completing his 4th year of the second term this year, and the term is a limited one. Prior to serving as Auditor General, Eugene served in the PA House of Representatives for 3 terms, and prior to that, he worked for the City of York as Economic Development Director. Eugene and his wife Tracy live in West York with their daughter and son. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please welcome past President Mike Summers and Pennsylvania's Auditor General Eugene DePasquale.
Good afternoon. This is the second of 2 conversations we are having with the candidates for the 10th Congressional District, spanning 2 Rotary program dates. We traditionally have a fall debate, but we are unable to do that because we could not find a common date for the 2 candidates. Each congressional seat in the United States represents approximately 750,000 people, and traditionally York County has been part of 1 congressional district due to its size. We have approximately 450,000 population. However, in 2018, redistricting happened as a challenge to how the maps were drawn, and the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court drew the boundaries dividing York into 2 congressional districts, cutting York County more or less in half, potentially altering the county's influence on congressional races in the future. The 11th Congressional District covers the southern half of York County and will feature incumbent Lloyd Smucker. He's a Republican from Lancaster County, and he's being challenged by Sarah Hammonds, who's a Democrat from Hanover. The 10th Congressional District, which we're here to talk about today, covers the northern half of York County, with York County representing about 33% of the district, and Cumberland representing about 30%, and Dauphin County representing 37%. The race for the 10th features incumbent Congressman Scott Perry. He's a Republican from Dillsburg, and Pennsylvania Auditor General Eugene DePasquale. He's a Democrat from West York. The district contains the cities of York and Harrisburg and several large municipalities like Hershey and Carlisle, but there's certainly an awful lot of suburbs and farmland in between, so it's a very diverse constituency and difficult to make everybody happy. We are holding 2 conversations with the
Not impossible.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. We're holding 2 conversations with the candidates for the 10th congressional seat. The first one was September 2nd and featured Scott Perry. Today will be the Democratic candidate, Eugene DePasquale. Our goal is to get to know each of the candidates on a personal level and to find out more about how they plan to represent Central Pennsylvania in Congress. In order to get as many questions as possible, I've asked the Auditor General to try to keep his answers contained. That's not easy as a politician, but we'll get more questions the more tight we keep the answers. As mentioned, our guest is Eugene DePasquale, who is no stranger to Rotary. Eugene has been to the club many, many times as our Auditor General. And Eugene, welcome back. So we'd like to get to know a little bit about Eugene, and probably most of you have seen a bunch of the political ads. We seem to be bombarded by them currently. And but I'd like you, Eugene, if you would maybe just talk a little bit about your family background and growing up.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood, which is actually about 3 blocks away from where the synagogue shooting was a couple years ago. The president of that synagogue actually is the wife of my Little League coach. So I grew up, a stone's throw from there. So, but that was the neighborhood I grew up in. Had 2 younger brothers. One, we've talked about in one of the commercials past. When I was a freshman in high school, we found out Anthony had muscular dystrophy. So that was obviously a big chunk of our lives moving forward, was dealing with him and his disability. Family owned a small bar. My mom she had to worry about the first line of the commercial because it said, "I grew up in a bar." And she said, this is mom, this is the voicemail. This is mom. The commercial's good, but why does it say you lived in a bar? We didn't live there. I'm like, oh, mom, it's a manner of speaking, right? But went to Pittsburgh Central Catholic High School, and played baseball and football there. We won the state title. It was probably we were up at State College. We beat Kyle Brady and Cedar Cliff. It's probably that day when you're not going to play in the NFL, though, when someone is 6'6", 280. It not only does it not tickle when they hit you, but they're faster than you. And that's when you sort of come to grips with what level of athlete those guys are. And he was the 10th pick in the draft for the Jets. Went to the College of Worcester in Ohio, played some baseball and football out there. Loved every second of it. My teammates in football voted me most inspirational, which wasn't that hard because we stunk. But we were really good in baseball. And then got my graduate degree at Pitt. When I was, and during this time, and we talked a little bit about in the commercial as well, my dad was wounded on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. He was shot twice in the right leg, which practically blew apart his leg. Shot once in the left leg. We debated in the commercial, should we put a picture up him or the helicopter would simulated him getting life flighted out of there. And he, first of all, he'll say it till the day he dies. You want to talk about real courage. He says, be a military medic who come out of nowhere with basically armed with a pistol, but they're not, other than getting through basic training, they're not there to use it. Bullets flying off of trees and stitching him up. And he's telling him to get down because he thinks he's going to die. What the hell are you doing? And to this day, he says he doesn't know how they did that. But the VA prescribed to him synthetic heroin, which they did to a lot of vets at that time, which led to a 30-year pattern of addiction and eventually incarceration. So when Anthony passed from muscular dystrophy, I was a first-year night law student. My dad was incarcerated, so he had to come to the funeral in shackles. Moved out here for law school, 2 kids. Ben is now a junior in college. He's at school in Wisconsin while he's on the couch. It's tough to be a music and environmental science major when you can't have any of your musical performances. And Mike and I would coach together, coach against each other in Legion Ball. So Ben would play for Shiloh, and so he does miss playing ball, but you can't do it right now. And Sarah is a senior in high school, and she is looking to Temple University. And I've loved every second of being Auditor General, every second. Finding things that are a problem, going in and fixing it. But I also know that those life experiences, seeing my mom trying to make it work while my dad's in prison, trying to make it work, having, a knucklehead like me that thought I was going to be pitching in Yankee Stadium. Spoiler alert, when you throw 84 miles an hour, it's not enough. Especially when you try, people say you tried for the Royals. How did it go? I said, I had 1 try. They go, how'd it go? I said, I had 1 try. But I've loved every second about it, but I've decided to run for Congress because I think my style of leadership could help make the country better and help make the district better. And I couldn't live with myself if I didn't take a shot, even though I know it's going to be hard, both to win and to try to get the country back on track.
Very good. You've been in public service for quite a while now. You served in the State House, Dan mentioned, Auditor General. Maybe it's just because you're from our area, I don't know, but I don't ever remember hearing so much about an Auditor General in the past. What do you think is your major achievement as far as being an elected office?
There's the 2 that are the hallmark audits, but to me, the one that'll, even if I accomplish nothing else, and I hope to accomplish a lot more, but it's the rape kits. when I say we, the ads say I did this, I did that. Understand, I'm the leader of a team. I know it's probably not the best thing to say in politics, that is, I didn't do all this stuff by myself, but the reality is, just like I'm the quarterback of a football team and the center doesn't block, you're going to get creamed. I'm the auditor general, I'm the leader of a team, but it's a team. And we found that those 3,200, and I say it was actually probably by the end of the whole thing, closer to 5,000, because when we started it, only 40% of police departments were even complying. And I almost think like all of my life lessons came into focus there. Sort of the stubbornness of being Italian from a city, not willing to take any crap, seeing what happened to women that got abused, and all came into focus with that I literally, I added the line that you're seeing in the commercial. Insiders were mad at me when I called them out, but I didn't care. I added the line, but I didn't care because I quite frankly didn't care. They were mad and I didn't care. And I'll never forget because I don't want to get too emotional about this. The only thing I'll end with that is it was Memorial Day of 2017. I had just been reelected earlier, and West York was in the state playoffs.
Yep.
And it was an odd day because Ben had to get the batting practice, but he's in the band. And there was a sort of like the coach was kind of like, hey, we got a state championship or semifinal, I think, or the quarterfinals was next. Semifinal, I forget which one it was. But he had to get the batting practice, but he had to play the national anthem for the Memorial Day thing, and I'm the speaker. So like it's convergence of like events. And I'm waiting, so I'm done and I'm gonna drive him right up there because my car is right there. And there's this guy pacing back and forth. And he looked rather harmless, but a little rough, but rather harmless. I could tell he wanted to come talk to me. And he just comes up and he says, you're Dee Pasquale. I said, yeah. And he goes, you're the only Democrat I voted for. I said, oh, thank you, sir. He goes, my daughter was one of those rape kits. And I'll never forget that.
You've done a lot of different audits. Your latest one came out yesterday, partial answer, I think, to the audit on Governor Wolf's team's approach to granting waivers for businesses to stay open during the pandemic. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
So obviously the pandemic happens and every governor across the country, as we can tell, had a different approach to this. Governor Wolf, and I've said this, I'll say this again, he had every right to go against the Department of Homeland Security guidelines because those were not mandated. And he came up with a policy on what was defined as life sustaining. The challenge to that was that there was a waiver to that process. And as we showed in our report yesterday, the waiver had to be put together in such a way that the staff was not able to be trained. The process changed throughout the process. If you end up having good lawyers or good lobbyists, not because they were doing anything untoward, at least we haven't found anything yet, but they would teach you how to write the right buzzwords. We found at the end of the day that it was the definition of unfair, not the policy itself, not even that there was a waiver program, but how the waiver program was implemented was unfair. Why does that matter? If we ever have to do this again, there are people that lost their whole livelihoods because of the shutdown. Now, perhaps justified if it meant keeping people safe. But if you're going to have a program like that, it's got to be fair. And if people are going to lose their livelihoods because you're trying to protect the public and your competitor is allowed to stay open only because somebody taught you how to write a better application, to me, that's just wrong. And when you saw yeses change to no and no's change to yes without an explanation, that was my biggest issue with it, is that if you're going to make those type of dramatic changes where a business was told they have to stay shut down, they apply again, only now using different buzzwords, you then allow them to reopen while their competitor is still closed, and you're not going to give the public, and in that case, I'm representing the public, an explanation for that change. I had an issue with that.
Now, if I read it correctly, that was a partial report. There's a full report coming? Do you have a timetable more or less when we could expect that?
It depends on how quickly we get the information. So you start off with that. What we've asked here is DCD said they had Department of Community and Economic Development had no information on whether there were written answers for the changes, even though they were the ones running the program. So now we've asked the governor's office for that information. Also, we have all the emails between lawyers and lobbyists that went to DCD. We're still awaiting that information from the governor's office. Once we get that, or whatever we get, that will then go into the final report.
Governor's office being cooperative?
Yeah, so
or-
yeah, everyone, it's a lot of information though, so.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
And they're dealing with some other issues too.
They are. Yeah, we're in a difficult situation for sure. Moving on to the federal budget. We were supposed to have a budget. First of all, the economy is about a $19.5 trillion economy. We were going to have a budget of $4.8 trillion, which was going to have baked in about $1 trillion deficit. March, obviously the pandemic hit and Congress passed a $2.4 trillion addition for COVID crisis. And that ballooned the deficit up an additional 10%, which is a little concerning. No doubt that extra spending helped bridge us through to where we are. And unemployment had peaked at 14.7% and is now down to 7.9. Pennsylvania, though, is still at 10.3. So here's the question. The House has been working, the Democratic House has been working for a additional spend on the crisis relief. It was at 3.4. They've dropped it as of last week down to 2.2. And yet there was 14 Democrats voted no, who started feeling uncomfortable, I guess, at the level. So the question is, would you be a yes or a no on that 2.2 trillion?
On the 2.2, look, I'm going to tell you this. I think they're all wrong for starters.
Okay.
What I mean by they're all wrong, Senate, House, and the president are all wrong on this because they're not working together. They're all playing politics with this thing. To me, and I said this, we were having, so I'm endorsed by the Blue Dogs, which is sort of the fiscally moderate wing of the Democratic caucus now. So that's who's endorsed me. So for this thing, like that's on the social issues, I'm admittedly pretty left. On the economic issues, I'm pretty much down the middle. And there was this debate about 300 versus 600. I think McConnell was saying 300, Speaker Pelosi was saying 600. And I'm on this call and everyone's going back and forth. And I said, does anybody actually have an analysis of what the number is to actually help people? Because I don't trust a number that ends in 0. And the call stops and everyone starts laughing. And the chair of the Blue Dogs goes, now that's my auditor. And because I said, like, I don't even know if any of those numbers are right. So for me to say I'm for one package or the other, to me, I want to get small businesses that can't reopen the help they need. I want people that have to stay unemployed because they're trying to find, because they want to go back to work, but can't, the help they need. Then we need to pump money into, and this is a whatever it takes cost to get a vaccine out and get it distributed. Those are our priorities in getting the frontline health workers the equipment they need to get that done. That should be the priority. And if we can't agree on that as a country, then we got other problems. So to me, that's whatever that cost is, that's what I'm for. But I don't trust any of their numbers. So for me to say I'm for Pelosi or McConnell's number, I think they're probably both wrong.
Okay, this will kind of play into that. So when we met with Congressman Perry last month, the U.S. national debt was at $26.7 trillion. It's now at $27 trillion, so $300 billion increase in a month.
Yeah.
It should be a little concerning. And the additional stimulus would take us potentially closer to 30 trillion. So the question, do deficits matter anymore?
They certainly matter. I don't know if they matter politically, but they matter for the long-term health of the country financially. No, look, in this pandemic, just similar to the Great Depression, you got to get the economy up and moving. So there are times when, again, it's uncomfortable, but you got to do it. But long-term, it's clearly a problem. They'll be running deficits at that level. Even if no one else is willing to admit it, they are. From the tax giveaway that happened a couple years ago, to just reckless spending across the board by presidents of both parties and Congresses of both parties, it's, at some point you start running into, even if it's not a political polling problem, it is going to be a problem. And so again, I want to be clear, during this pandemic, I'm more on the side of, let's err on the side of getting life pumped into the economy. But then after that, we've got to have a reassessment of our priorities and figure out where where some, cuts are going to be needed and where we can, what we need to readjust.
All right. So I heard you say tax giveaway. I assume that's the Trump
Yeah,
tax cut.
That's right.
What's your view? You want to take those back, or is it nuanced as far as who you would target? And
To me, yeah. So it would be more of a nuance, less on the individuals, more on the corporate side of it. Although I've always said it before, and I'll say it again, whether this helps or hurts me politically, there was one aspect of that was right. And that is country or companies got rewarded for not offshoring. And if you put your domicile back in the United States, you didn't get punished in the tax code. I wouldn't want to touch that. But some of the big pharma giveaways I thought were a mistake. I think they got something like a $42 billion giveaway. I just thought that was wrong. Meanwhile, average everyday folk didn't see any benefit out of that at all. And when the wealthier got a cut that most people that were wealthy said they didn't need, it's not as if that helped grow the economy anymore. I thought if you're going to cut it for anybody, it should have been for working families.
Okay, fair enough. The second major arc in 2020 is social unrest due to the deaths and injuries and questions of equity. The names of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, unrest, marches, protests, social justice, riots, Black Lives Matter, all in the news every single day. And it seems, unfortunately, that we're having situations with law enforcement bubble up each day. I asked this question to your opponent, so I'll ask it to you as well. Do you see systemic racism in our society? And if so, where? And what would you do about it as a member of Congress?
A couple of things I want to say. First of all, there is systemic racism, in my view, in the United States. All you have to do is look at our unfair education system across the United States, where your education outcomes are almost entirely dictated by zip code, which that's wrong. It's unacceptable. And is there violence towards people that are white? Of course that happens from law enforcement, but we have seen way too many instances of people of color being killed by law enforcement. And what happened with George Floyd is unacceptable. It should be unacceptable to every American. I hope it is. So those are clearly. Now I want to also be clear. Any form of violence is unacceptable, and I oppose defunding the police. But I also feel very comfortable saying Black Lives Matter. And my son, I think, said it best. He said, when you put a bumper sticker on your car that says Save the Bay, that's recognizing that there is a specific pollution problem in the Chesapeake Bay that you support fixing. That doesn't mean you're anti-Pacific Ocean. If you say Black Lives Matter, it's recognizing there is a specific problem that we as a country need to address and need to fix to make sure all lives matter. It doesn't mean you're anti anybody else. Just like if, my daughter, she wants to save the dolphins, doesn't mean she's anti-sea turtle. She just wants, it's the same. It's not the same thing in a literal sense. But if you want to save the bay, that doesn't mean you're anti-Pacific Ocean. You get this thing, well, don't all lives matter? Of course all lives matter, but to make sure all lives matter, we have to make sure Black lives matter.
I think your son has a future.
He,
You tell him I said that.
you got it.
All right. What would you do to overcome the hyper-partisanship that is plaguing our country and get the legislative work that members of Congress were elected to do going?
I'd like to say, for starters, try to be myself or be myself. You've seen my role as Auditor General, where basically I've done enough to sort of make everybody in elected politics hate me. So I've got that going for me. When I was the first legislator to post my expenses online, I said I unified the Pennsylvania General Assembly like no one ever had. 202 legislators all ripping mad at me. When I was in the Democratic caucus that day, who here has seen Animal House? Maybe you don't want to raise your hands because we're on camera. Remember the scene where they're voting who goes into the fraternity? They put up the picture of, was it Bluto? And they all start throwing the beer cans at him at the picture on the wall. That was like me in the Democratic caucus when I put my expenses online. But that exact same term, I passed the Alternative Energy Investment Act, which helped make Pennsylvania a leader in wind energy east of the Mississippi. Every single Republican in the state Senate voted for that bill, every single one. Only 10 House Republicans voted against it. Scott Perry was, of course, one of them because he's that extreme. But it was 190 to 12. Every single Republican in the state Senate voted for it. It was unanimous in the state Senate because I worked 2 years negotiating with everybody that was willing to be a negotiator on that. Where do I got to move the comma? Do we need to put a little bit more here? Do we need to take a little bit out there? I listened to everybody. And when that was signed into law, we had members of both parties at the signing ceremony, and it is still one of the most hallmark environmental achievements in Pennsylvania history. That's how you do it. I've pledged to join the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a group that meets every Tuesday. But I've said I'm only going to do it on the condition that it's not the crybaby caucus. And by meaning the crybaby caucus, everyone goes in there and complains how hard it is. To me, if you're afraid of it being hard, don't run for Congress. You know, I hear we're on some of these calls sometimes because they have these called red to blue candidates. And I'm sure the other side has the same thing where you're trying to beat a district that is currently held by the other party. And they're all crybabies. I mean, I don't mean them all. And, oh, this is hard. They're saying this about me. Well, what do you think was going to happen? I mean, didn't everybody go train with the Navy SEALs for a weekend to get ready for it? Like I did? Apparently not. I don't care that it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be hard to get elected to Congress. It's supposed to be hard to get anything else done. It's supposed to be. And anyone that doesn't understand that and isn't willing to work through those challenges really shouldn't be in Congress.
If you had a magic wand and you could get one.
Or a lightsaber.
Or a lightsaber, but a magic wand in this case, and you could get one piece of legislation into law, what do you think it would be?
Oh, yeah, if I could do because I've said the first bill I'm going to introduce would be to eliminate nationwide funding to eliminate the backlog of untested rape kits. But I would find if I had the magic wand, it would be a mix of private and public to make sure everybody in the United States had health insurance. It'd be a mix of private and public, but it'd be to make sure everyone had health insurance because I think it's that critical, especially during a pandemic.
Fair enough. COVID, we've had about 8 million infections nationwide, and unfortunately about 211,000 deaths. Very sad. What did the Trump administration get right and what did they get wrong? And I'd like you to keep this kind of contained.
Yeah, so what they did right was shutting off the travel to and from China. They were right about that. And he did that relatively quick. I don't know if that was because of an instinct or briefing. I have no idea, but I think they were right about that. No, I know they were right about that. And many Democrats were wrong because I think they condemned it initially and they were wrong about that. I don't know what he believes privately, but the public behavior on him towards masks, the vaccine, and the danger of the virus has been confusing at best and reckless at worst. And just as a parent who's got a son who can't go back to college, I'm not saying it's Donald Trump's fault, but we should still not be in this situation. And the president at a minimum wasn't helpful. And at a maximum was entirely reckless. And the president, a big part of their job is to lead and lead by example. And he has not done that.
Okay, fair enough. As of Monday, there has been about 8,227 deaths attributed to COVID in Pennsylvania. And at least 5,485 of the Pennsylvania deaths are due to coronavirus were in nursing home residents. That's about 67%. Is Pennsylvania doing an adequate job with these senior care facilities?
No. For starters, we did a performance audit in 2016, finished that year that laid out before COVID all of the issues with our nursing homes. And that audit is available online and the problems still exist. Not enough random inspections. The nurse to staff or the nurse to patient ratio is too high. And then you throw in a pandemic where they weren't ready for it, didn't have enough equipment. Staff was going in there, visitors still going in until it was too late, helping spread the virus even more. So the short answer is no.
Okay. Social Security, we have a surplus currently. It's going to be depleted by 2035. At that point, we'll only have money coming in to cover about 79% of the promises that have been made. Congress, for whatever reason, seems to not want to address this. It's obviously coming up quickly. What do you think should be done?
number one, the best way to get money back into that would be to get the economy back up and running. Because the longer that the unemployment rate stays what it is, that's less people paying into the systems. That's number one. Number two, Congress and administrations of both parties have to quit dipping into that to go start funding wars in other parts of the world and sort of paying an IOU to Social Security, which never gets repaid. So those two things are as a start. And then look, clearly, like I don't support raising the retirement age because you've got a lot of people that work a lot of physically laborious jobs. So I believe we should be respectful of that. But clearly there's going to be a long-term funding gap and we've got to all come together to fix that. But getting the economy back up and running and not using that money for anything other than Social Security are the two starting points. And I know we made fun of it at the time and it was probably one of the greater Saturday Night Live sketches, but Al Gore was right. There should have been a lockbox.
Sure. The election coming up, many people are choosing to vote by mail. That seems to be a controversy as far as whether that's going to be a problem or not. What are your views on the mail-in ballots?
Eligible voters should be able to cast their ballot under any legal means allowed. That is in Pennsylvania, in person or by mail. I don't even know why this is controversial. Actually, the funny thing about this is when this law was being pushed, the Democrats hated it and the Republicans were pushing it. Now there's this reversal. And to me, it's situational ethics, which I hate. To me, if the voters want to vote by mail, let them vote by mail. If they want to vote in person, obviously we got to have masks and stay apart, then let's do that. But there's been Oregon, I think Utah, Colorado have been voting entirely by mail for over a decade. They've elected Republicans and Democrats. And if we all stopped worrying about which party was going to get this slight advantage one year over the next, just recognize there's a lot of people have a lot of complications in life. They, maybe you live in York, but you work in Baltimore. You may be an hourly worker. Maybe you're a nurse. Maybe you're a doctor, get called into surgery. All those things combined, why shouldn't we be trying to find more ways for people to cast a legal ballot? I don't need, this is one where I literally don't even understand it.
Okay. Executive orders, every president going back to actually Washington has used executive orders. FDR was unbelievable as far as the numbers he used. He was fighting a war at the time, of course. But it seems like that both past President Obama and President Trump, they've used executive orders extensively to, in my view, at times to go around Congress versus building coalitions through compromise legislations. What are your thoughts on executive orders?
I don't sit here and say I'm against every executive order. Presidents are presidents. They're the chief executive of the federal or the executive branch of the government. Having said that, as a Democrat, President Obama, two issues: Affordable Care Act passed through Congress. Then you had DACA. DACA was able to be attacked, whether you like it or not, the Dreamers Bill or the executive order, and reversed through an executive order versus the Affordable Care Act, with the entire Republican Party trying to throw that out for over a decade, and they can't. Why? One was passed by Congress and one was signed as an executive order. Whether you are more favorable to DACA and against the ACA or vice versa, forgetting that for just a second, forget where you stand on either issue. The way you create a lasting change is to work with Congress to get something done. And I support what DACA's goals are, but I still believe President Obama should have kept working with Congress to try to get that enshrined into a statute. I also believe that there are times when Congress cowardly says, well, he's going to do an executive order anyway, so I don't have to put up a tough vote. And the one I may be the only one on this, although I don't think so, maybe through personal experience or what have you. I think Congresses of both parties have given presidents of both parties way too much leniency on sending troops anywhere in the world without a congressional vote to authorize it. Once we are in armed conflict, the president is the commander in chief. Zero doubt about that. I don't want Congress micromanaging a war. But only the Congress should be deciding whether we're going to fund that and send troops into harm's way. And we've allowed, when I say we, the country has allowed presidents to do that of both parties because Congress cowardly doesn't want to put up a vote. So the president then gets stuck and makes the decision. So this is on Congress and the president, but I side on, even if it's frustrating and hard, when you pass it into law through a work of Congress with the administration, you have something that's more long lasting and will pass the test of time because you're forced to compromise.
Yeah, I think that's part of the checks and balances that our
Yeah.
founders had in mind when they drafted the Constitution. Who's your vote for Speaker?
Considering I won't be a candidate, and I got to win first, I'm more worried about my values. When I say my value, I mean the values of South Central Pennsylvania. Who's going to be on my side for trying to fight for lower prescription drug prices, reforming healthcare, tackling climate change in a pragmatic way? And when there's people running, those are the questions I'm going to ask, and then I'll determine my vote.
Okay. And speaking of your district, it is a somewhat moderate conservative. I think people would say our
Yeah.
area is defined that way. Doesn't mean there aren't liberals.
I'm red-green colorblind, but they would describe it as pink. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So the question is that you'll caucus obviously with the Democratic Party. There's some very progressive sides to the Democratic Party. How will you work with those individuals and still represent a more moderate conservative area?
By doing what I've done as Auditor General. For starters, the first ad that was attacking me for one of those progressives, I'm like, I have a secret plan with her and I've never met her and I don't have a secret plan. Other than that, it makes sense. Do what I've done as Auditor General, do what I did in the State House. That's part of being in Congress. And by the way, members should represent their district. I mean, this idea that we're going to be mad at some conservative for representing a conservative district conservatively, be mad at some liberal for representing a liberal district liberally, and then being mad at a moderate for representing a moderate district moderately. Like that's what Congress was, that's what the House was set up for. The president's to represent the whole country, the Senate, the states, the House is to be most in touch with their districts. That's how it's supposed to work. So I have nothing against conservative or liberal members that are representing their districts, but I'm a moderate Democrat in a district that is a moderate district. And compared to the incumbent, I know I will be much more reflective of the values of this district than the current congressman, who I view as way too extreme for the district.
Okay. I'm going to go back to that original opening statement I made that traditionally York County has been whole in the congressional district, which puts actually York County in a position of control of the election of who that is. So traditionally the person has been from York County. We're going to go through redistricting again following this census. Are you in favor of seeing York County put back together, or are you happy with how it's set up currently?
First of all, if I don't win the election, I'll be drunk on a beach somewhere, so it won't matter anyway. To me, look, to me, the map should be drawn fairly. The goal of the district drawing of the maps should be to make districts competitive. That should be the goal. Voters should be picking their politicians, not politicians picking their voters. So if I'm honored to win, then whatever map they give me going forward, I'll fight like heck to represent it. After that, that's not my hands. I shouldn't be trying to pick my voters.
Okay. Going on to foreign affairs, the U.S. spends on defense more than the next 10 countries combined. So we definitely believe in defense, which is awesome, and we defend an awful lot of people around the world. The defense spending is about 15% of all federal spending and roughly half the discretionary spending. So are we allocating too much on defense, about the right amount, or not enough?
The primary goal, in my view, and I've been asked this question before, first of all, there's no way in my mind that we can't trim some of that back. There's no way. The goal, or to me, the future of global threats is terrorism, access to weapons of mass destruction, and trying to keep bad actors from having those weapons. That means we have to rebuild our international alliances. We have to work with our friends and foes, because I don't think China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Britain, or us, name the country, wants terrorists to have nuclear weapons. That is a threat to everybody. And to me, that means we've got to retool our defense along those lines. And that, and to me, I think that will be less costly, but I think also more effective. And I think my role as Auditor General, having the experience, one of the committees I said I want to go on is Armed Services. I know there's a lot of local jobs here, but B, I think I can provide my level of expertise on how can we get something that still protects us and is more efficient and less costly.
What other committees are you interested in?
I've been told to say every committee because you don't want to alienate anyone, but then I go ahead and then alienate people anyway. So Armed Services and Education and Labor would be my two primary. Again, drunk on a beach if I don't win this thing, so it doesn't matter what my committee requests for. And because in case anyone's wondering, it would be a local IPA that I would be drinking. Or an organic wine, because you gotta, you can't alienate people on which wine you're drinking, but it would be a dry red. Maybe a combination too, if it's a real blowout. But it would be Education and Labor or Armed Services. Below that would be and because I've been told that you'd only get one of your two top priorities. Energy and the environment would be one. I told there's no way a first termer goes on that one. So it'd be also small business. If I don't get Armed Services, I would want Veterans Affairs. And if I don't get Education and Labor, I would want small business.
Okay, very good. Your thoughts on illegal immigration? Should people be sent back to their countries of origin if they're here illegally?
First of all, we should have strong borders. I don't like the style when the president always goes about that, but we should have strong borders. I think you can be tough and smart at the same time. So how you secure that border, some areas it may be a fence, some a wall, some places it may be drones, some places it may just be tighter security. The 2008 Senate or 2006 Senate bill, I think, should be the starting point on that. People that are undocumented that are here, I believe we should create a path to citizenship for them. Obviously, they should be paying any back taxes, anything that they've done illegal or otherwise, they should pay their debts to society. But I believe for people that have been living here sometimes decades, that we've got to find a path to citizenship, assuming they take care of a lot of these, if they have fines or taxes they got to pay. And when it comes to becoming a legal citizen, they should go to the back of the line of the application process and not get bumped ahead people that were waiting their line, turn in line. But no, we should not be sending them back. And the separation of children from their families, to me, is immoral.
So staying on DACA, you feel that Congress should be dealing with that issue?
That's right. Again, cowardly of both parties. DACA is better off being a law than executive order, but it is a law I would support.
Okay, fine. What's your stance on the Second Amendment?
To me, another false debate. I think you can protect the Second Amendment and have common sense security. Two issues that I've said point blank. We should be having comprehensive background checks, comprehensive, and at the same token, I don't think civilians should have access to military style weapons. But if you're a hunter, if you're someone that is, or wants to have, a handgun to protect your home, I'm not going to interfere with that.
Great. Do you want to talk a little bit about fracking, since that's a big element to Pennsylvania and certainly the economy overall and the environment?
We should, first of all, I did an audit of the fracking industry when I was my first term as Auditor General. The regulations were too lax, there weren't enough inspectors. I believe we should be moving as rapidly as possible to zero net carbon emissions as soon as science will allow it. Having said that, this is a way to transition there that is less pollutant than other forms of energy, particularly coal. So to me, as a transition, I think we need to be making sure we're thoroughly regulating the pipelines. I think when someone impacts a well, particularly in rural Pennsylvania, where that has happened way too often, they need to be fined immensely because you're damaging people's drinking water. And the drilling sites need to be thoroughly regulated with the appropriate staff from the Department of Environmental Protection. But the idea of a ban to me is non-workable. And again, this is a transition into cleaner energy down the line.
Great. Where do you diverge, if at all, with your political party's presidential candidates' views, philosophies, and statements?
For starters, I do, and I've been again asked this question many times. I think President Trump is onto something when he talks about trade. And don't like his style. You know, the bull in the China shop to me may work in some areas, not in others, but that's not my style. However, I do think he's right that we have negotiated too many of these trade deals out of weakness. And that is President Obama and President Clinton in particular, who I liked a lot of what they did as president. But those two areas, I thought they gave away too much, particularly to China, because too many American companies wanted access to those markets. So we allowed China to steal our intellectual property and not get our car manufacturers fair access to those markets. And that's something that I think we need to crack down on. I clearly disagree with the vice president on that.
So let's stay with China just for a second.
The former vice president.
Former vice
I don't know what Mike Pence's views on that are.
Let's stay with China for a second. They obviously are a emerging, not only economy, they obviously have 1 billion people. They're also a communist dictatorship. Friend, foe?
More foe than friend, but we got to deal with them. The two big kids on the block. Yeah, we're bigger, but they're a big kid too. Got to deal with them. That means dialogue with them is the only way to go.
Okay.
That's the only way.
And let's move to maybe countries that aren't quite as large. So let's talk about North Korea. Let's talk about Iran, and certainly who used to be our big adversary, Russia.
Yeah.
Any views on any of those?
North Korea worries me without, again, I want to be clear. I don't have, when you're running for Congress, they don't give you any secret military briefings. And if they were secret, I wouldn't have told you anyway, but I don't have it anyway. So don't worry about me trying to keep the secret. North Korea worries me a lot because I just don't view that situation as stable. And that's the understatement. They're in a sense not a real country, meaning there's no real economy, et cetera. So that worries me. Them having access to nuclear weapons. Iran, I have enormous problems with the leadership of Iran, but the people of Iran, I think, are coming our way, not meaning westernized democracy, although you see that in their local elections. I think we have to try to find a way to foster that more, while at the same time being clear that their funding of Hamas is unacceptable and the United States will not tolerate that, but at the same time work to try to foster the democracy that's clearly developing in Iran. It's also clear that they're a real country. What I mean by that is obviously North Korea is a real country, but Iran has a real education system, the real medical, if you took out the clerics, there is a real functioning bureaucratic state and a government with a public-private sector there that does not exist in North Korea. Russia to me is sort of, it's almost a combination of the two. I think Iran is ascending, North Korea is descending, and I think Russia's stuck in that they want to be what they were, but they can't, so they're full of bluster to try to stay there. And what Putin has done, allowing his friends to become super rich at the expense of families throughout Russia. I mean, the alcoholism rate among everyone in Russia, but particularly men, is staggering. And again, I have nothing against the Russian people, but we cannot pretend that Vladimir Putin is anything other than a former KGB agent with a boatload of money.
Fair enough. We're going to go one last statement, then we'll let you close, and then we'll let Ann close up the meeting. What would you say the top 3 needs for the district are, and what are you proposing to do about each?
Starting off with, COVID is #1 in every district in the country, doesn't matter. So if we're talking district specific, healthcare is a huge industry here, but we also have to make sure that it's fairly distributed. So we got to make sure everyone has access to our great healthcare facilities in here. That would be insurance reform, particularly on pre-existing conditions where the congressman and I have huge disagreements. I mean, he's right now supporting a lawsuit to overturn the ACA. That would cost tens of thousands of South Central Pennsylvania residents with a pre-existing condition, one of which would actually be COVID. They would lose their coverage if that gets overturned. I clearly disagree with them on that. That's issue 1. Issue 2, who here has driven on a road in our region. I mean, my God, right? I mean, so we've got to do something about our infrastructure. And number three, our air and water quality are horrible in this region. And I've said, I don't care who the president is, I'm going to be banging away at EPA. The Susquehanna River is one of the most polluted waterways in the entire United States. And the air quality of South Central Pennsylvania is horrible. The asthma rate among our kids is a disgrace. And those three issues are district specific that I would focus on.
Great. All right, we're going to let you finish by saying, why should we vote for you, Gene?
You've seen me as a tough, fair, and independent watchdog for the past 8 years, cracking down on wasteful spending in Harrisburg, being a leader on reducing the backlog of untested rape kits, finding 58,000 unanswered phone calls at the child abuse hotline. Talked about my personal story. I get the challenges everyone else is facing, particularly during COVID. So if you want someone who can be tough, fair, and independent, who has some humanity to try to connect with people that are struggling and wants to try to tone down the rhetoric to bring our country together, I'm your member of Congress.
All right, my fellow Rotarians and my virtual Rotarians, could we please thank Eugene DePasquale for taking the time out of his very busy day. That's a couple hundred virtual claps going on there.
That's right.
We really appreciate you, putting yourself out there as a public figure for the voters to talk about. We know it's a difficult process. People take unique little things and turn them on their heads, which is never fun when you're the person. It's awful for your family. But we do appreciate you for your past public service, and we thank you for being willing to be a candidate. And we'll see how it all turns out in a couple weeks.
And hopefully we can coach against each other in Legion again next summer too.
Maybe we can.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
President Ann.
Thank you, Past President Mike. Eugene, we thank you for your decades of public service. We have many fellow Rotarians in our club who are elected officials, and we thank all of them for their public service, and we appreciate all those who are willing to roll up their sleeves for the hard work of public office, especially at this point in time. And Mike, Past President Mike, I would like to thank you on behalf of all of the club for your economic experience, for your political savvy, for your worldview, obviously very extensive research that you did to help us and ensure that our club members are informed of the candidate's views so that we and our community can make informed decisions when we go to the polls soon. So thank you, Mike. Rotary's theme is international is Rotary opens opportunities, and this is certainly an opportunity and among many that you open for us. As members of the club know, this typically is a debate format, and Mike has helped us to highlight elected officials running for county commissioner, for Congress, and for mayor. This year, we couldn't get the schedules coordinated, so I have a feeling we'll be back to the debate and make sure that we do that in the future. But it really was nice to have these more intimate conversations as well. So thank you very much, Mike, for your work to deliver that to us. Rotary International has goals. Patty, our past president, calls them promises to the world, and one of those is education. So it has been a tradition since past President Di Hershey that in honor of our speaker, that we provide a book. And Eugene has signed the book plate, and it just was coincidence or happy circumstance from a fellow Pittsburgher. And that is the story of Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood, You Are My Friend. And this will be given to the childcare at the York Jewish Community Center. Next week, our speaker will be political analyst, Dr. G. Terry Madonna, and he'll have a lot to talk about this year. The November election is 3 weeks away, and 2020 has already been a wild, unpredictable year. Our speaker, Dr. Madonna, will speak about the presidential election and his outlook for the election. You are invited to join us next week and each and every Wednesday here, at least virtually for now, at the Rotary Club of York. Our closing song for those of you that have joined us virtually is Shining Star by Earth, Wind, and Fire. We wish you a wonderful day and a fantastic week. Stay safe.